The clink of silverware on plates fills the air, but it's the silence between bites that feels deafening. Around the dinner table, the weight of unspoken words presses down like a storm waiting to break. My parents, lost in their usual chatter, have no idea what's coming. I can feel my heart pounding, each beat echoing in my ears as I prepare to drop the bombshell. They told me I was wasting my life, I think to myself, the words searing my mind. I was playing pretend while they toasted my cousin's latest promotion. The smirk on my mom's face, the knowing glance from my dad, they all thought the same thing. But last Friday, everything changed. I've worked for this moment, and now, finally, it's time to pull back the curtain. They have no idea what's about to hit them, and I can't wait to see their faces when the truth comes out. Ethan Walker grew up in a world where success had a clear definition. High-powered jobs, big houses, luxury cars, and a career path that led straight to a corner office. His parents, both accomplished professionals in their own right, never wavered in their belief that the only road to fulfillment was through prestige and financial security. They had one vision for him: become a lawyer, a doctor, or a corporate executive. Anything else was a distraction, a waste of potential. The pressure was suffocating. From an early age, Ethan was expected to excel academically, climb the social ladder, and secure a future that mirrored the success his parents had achieved. Anything less was failure. He felt the weight of their expectations on his shoulders, the unspoken demand to follow a set path that never seemed to leave room for anything else. But then, everything changed. After landing a high-paying job in finance right out of college, Ethan's life seemed to follow the blueprint laid out for him. But despite the six-figure salary, the luxury apartments, and the prestige that came with the job, Ethan felt empty. His soul longed for something more, something bigger. One evening, after a particularly draining day at the office, he made a decision that shocked everyone. He quit. He walked away from a future full of comfort and security to pursue something entirely different, starting his own tech business. To his parents, it was reckless. They called him a failure, an idealist who didn't understand the real world. But Ethan had a vision they couldn't see, a plan they didn't understand. Secretly, he spent every waking hour building his business, coding late into the night, pushing forward on a dream that no one thought was possible. They didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. The familiar smell of roasted chicken and garlic mashed potatoes filled the air as Ethan walked into his parents' home. It was a typical family dinner. Everyone gathered around the table, plates clinking, glasses being refilled. He knew what was coming. His parents had perfected the art of subtle criticism, wrapped in well-meaning remarks, and tonight he could already feel the tension building. Mom was the first to strike. "You know Carol's son, Greg, just got a huge promotion at his firm. I swear he's going places, a real go-getter." She smiled almost too sweetly as she set her fork down. "You know, Ethan, Greg followed the traditional path. Law school, corporate ladder. No offense, but that tech startup of yours seems, well, a little like a hobby, don't you think?" Ethan's stomach tightened. The words cut deeper than she knew, but he kept his face neutral, swallowing the bitterness. He knew what was coming next. Dad chimed in, never one to shy away from an opportunity to put his son in his place. "A hobby, indeed. I mean, how much money are you even making with that thing?" He scoffed, glancing over at his latest trophy, his cousin Tom, who had built a successful career as a senior executive. Tom's doing great, corporate life, real job security, a future. Meanwhile, you're playing around with whatever it is you're doing. How long before that business fizzles out? The words stung more than he cared to admit. Every jab, every subtle comparison to their image of success felt like a blow. Ethan's hands tightened around his fork, but beneath the frustration, there was something else. A quiet, unshakable resolve. They didn't understand yet, but he would prove them wrong. He'd bide his time, wait for the perfect moment, and show them what real success looked like. It was only a matter of time. The conversation lingered in a predictable loop, each jab landing with an almost practiced precision. Ethan took it all in stride, a slight smile playing on his lips as he kept his responses measured. He had become accustomed to these moments, these subtle digs at his choices. But tonight, he wasn't just going to sit back and absorb the blows. Tonight, he was planting the seed. "So," Ethan said, casually shifting in his seat, "we've been working on a rebrand for the business, trying to find new ways to connect with a broader audience. The response has been pretty positive." He took a sip of water, keeping his voice calm, not wanting to sound like he was bragging, but eager to drop the first hint. "We've already seen some decent growth this quarter. It's a solid start." Mom raised an eyebrow, her lips curling in that familiar mix of skepticism and polite interest. "Rebrand? Interesting. I'm sure it's all very exciting. But is it really enough to make a difference?" Ethan glanced at his dad, who was giving him that look, the one that said he didn't believe a word. He reached into his pocket, slow and deliberate, pulling out a sleek new business card with the fresh logo. "Here, Dad," he said, handing it over with quiet confidence. "Thought you might like to see it." His dad took the card, looking at it briefly before scoffing. "Nice try, kid. You really think a new logo's going to change anything?" He flicked the card back onto the table with a dismissive gesture. "It's just more of the same, right?" Ethan's pulse quickened, but he remained unfazed. "Maybe, but there's a lot more going on than just the logo." He glanced at his watch, the anticipation rising in his chest. "Actually," he continued, a hint of calm excitement creeping into his voice, "there's an article about to go live in the next few minutes. It's a pretty big deal. Should be interesting to see the reaction." The parents exchanged glances, clearly still unconvinced. They had no idea. Ethan could feel the moment creeping closer, the quiet hum of excitement pulsing through him as he silently counted down the minutes. The time had almost come. The truth would soon be impossible to ignore. As the conversation carried on, the familiar buzz of phones at the dinner table suddenly filled the silence. Ethan's watchful eyes caught the synchronized vibrations as all three phones lit up with the same notification. The Wall Street Journal. A moment of stillness hung in the air, and Ethan could feel his heartbeat quicken. This was it. His mom reached for her phone first, her eyes scanning the headline before her expression faltered. Dad was next, his finger swiping quickly to read the news, and then Tom, ever the corporate supporter, did the same. Ethan remained calm, his hands folded neatly on the table, watching their faces. The words on the screen were undeniable. Startup valuation soars to $500 million, tech firm disrupting the industry. For a moment, no one spoke. His parents were too stunned to say anything, their mouths slightly agape as they processed the shocking headline. It was clear they didn't know how to react, trying to downplay it in the same way they always had, but the numbers were there, in black and white, $500 million. His mom cleared her throat first. "Well, I mean, that's impressive, I suppose, but, still, what does this mean in the long run?" Ethan could see the doubt in their eyes, the disbelief. He let the silence stretch, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. Finally, with the calm certainty that had been building inside him for years, he added, "Oh, and we turned down a $1 billion acquisition offer." The words hung in the air like a bombshell. The shift in their expressions was immediate: astonishment, followed by a reluctant realization that this wasn't just some fleeting venture. The tables had turned. Ethan had done it. The success wasn't just real, it was undeniable. Mom's fingers tightened around her phone as she stared at the headline, disbelief clouding her face. "Wait, this can't be right," she murmured, shaking her head. "There must be some mistake. I mean, you dropped out of Harvard to chase this startup thing, and now you're worth $500 million. Number, this doesn't make sense." Her voice wavered with frustration, as if trying to force the facts into a narrative that fit her reality. "You can't just... How did this happen?" Ethan could feel the tension thickening, the disbelief hanging in the air like a fog. He knew they'd have trouble accepting it, but this was the moment he'd been waiting for. Dad, sitting across from him, seemed pale, his fingers pressing against his temples as if he couldn't process the information fast enough. He cleared his throat, struggling to regain his composure. This doesn't make any sense. What does this even mean? How does a tech company, something we've been calling a hobby, get to a point where it's worth $500 million? His voice had a tinge of panic, his worldview unraveling before him. "This just isn't the way things work. I don't understand how this happened." Ethan, calm and collected, let them speak. He didn't gloat, didn't rush to fill the silence. Instead, he simply stated the facts. "Well, for starters, major banks are bidding for the company. Top investors are reaching out to buy into it." His voice remained steady, unshaken. "We're looking at expansion across several new markets. The growth has been faster than we ever expected." The silence that followed was deafening. His parents exchanged uneasy glances, still trying to come to terms with what they were hearing. Ethan leaned back slightly, his gaze shifting to his father. "You remember when you told me that tech was just a fad and that I wasn't having a real career? How's that advice looking now?" The question wasn't a challenge. It wasn't meant to rub salt in the wound. It was simply a reminder that success doesn't always fit into the neat, traditional boxes they had believed in. It didn't always look the way they expected, but it was real, and it was undeniable. Ethan's mom, still grappling with the news, looked at him with a mixture of confusion and frustration. She couldn't seem to let go of the image she had of him, the one she had built in her mind over the years. "But Ethan," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "why don't you care about the things? The car, the clothes, the apartment. You used to talk about how you'd have everything, luxury, the best of the best. Why aren't you focusing on the stuff that matters in the real world?" Her words stung in a way Ethan hadn't expected. It wasn't about the car, or the clothes, or the apartment. It was about something deeper, something his parents still didn't understand. He took a deep breath, steadying himself before responding, his voice calm but firm. "Mom, those things, they've never been my priority. I'm focused on building something that lasts, something that actually makes a difference. Success for me isn't about flashy cars or the latest fashion. It's about solving problems, creating solutions, and innovating in ways that can change industries. That's what I'm working toward, not just making money for the sake of it." He paused, watching as his words sunk in. He wasn't trying to convince them, but he was finally making them see the difference between their world and his. It wasn't about the external trappings of success. It was about purpose and vision. There was a long silence. His mom seemed lost in thought, her fingers absently tracing the rim of her wineglass. His father sat still, eyes narrowed in contemplation, as if processing the magnitude of what Ethan had just shared. For a brief moment, the family shifted. Ethan's dad, still reluctant to fully embrace it, looked at his son differently. There was no immediate acceptance, no grand epiphany, but for the first time they saw him not just as a dreamer, but as someone who had achieved something extraordinary, something they couldn't ignore. They may not fully understand his priorities, but the reality of Ethan's success was undeniable. As the minutes passed, the tension in the room began to shift. His parents were still quiet, but their expressions had changed. Less skepticism, more contemplation. Ethan could sense it. Slowly, they were coming to terms with the idea that success wasn't a one-size-fits-all concept. His mother, after a long silence, finally spoke, her tone softer than before. I guess I always thought success meant following a clear path, the kind we knew, with a secure job, a big house, and everything in its place. She paused, her gaze now more open, less defensive. But maybe you're right. There's more to it than that. Ethan's dad, while still unsure, gave a slight nod. You've certainly proved us wrong about a lot of things, Ethan. We've always thought that stability and a predictable future were the only ways to succeed, but, well, maybe you found your own way. Ethan took a moment, reflecting on the journey that had led him here. He thought back to the countless late nights coding, the sacrifices he had made, the doubts that plagued him when he walked away from the predictable life his parents had envisioned for him. Every misstep, every failure had brought him closer to this moment. And now, with his business thriving and the world watching, he could finally see how far he'd come. I didn't get here alone, he said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. But I believed in something bigger than what was expected of me, and that's why I walked away from it all. But the truth is, this is just the beginning. There's so much more to come. The room grew quieter, but the energy had shifted. His parents weren't fully on board yet, but they had begun to see his path not as a failure, but as a different kind of success. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Ethan felt that his parents might understand, if only a little, that he had forged his own way. And that was enough. Ethan stood up, feeling the weight of the moment settle into his bones. His journey had been long, 3 years of struggle, rejection, and countless moments of doubt. But now, with his success on display, it wasn't just about proving the doubters wrong, it was about the perseverance that had gotten him here. He looked at his parents one last time, his voice steady but filled with quiet conviction. This moment, this success, it feels sweet, but it's just the beginning. The real challenge is still ahead of me. There was a pause, a final understanding in his eyes. The lesson? Stay true to your vision, no matter what anyone says. The road won't be easy, but those who keep believing in themselves will see it pay off. Success doesn't always come in the package others expect, but it's real for those who don't give up. And with that, Ethan knew his journey was far from over. It was.